continuing on with step 4, rituals of dream work, inner work, which is Robert A. Johnson's book on how to do dream work. So the next heading is titled The Ceremony of the Flowers. To illustrate ways that different people have custom-designed simple rituals to honor their dreams, we will look at a few more examples. The first takes us back to a dream that we looked at earlier, the dream of the monastery. You may recall that I said earlier we would be returning to this dream to see what had happened with the dream and the dreamer when she approached the fourth step of the dream work. The dreamer's experience illustrates a fact that is well known to people who work regularly with their dreams. If we do our work inwardly and do small rituals to express our inner situation, it often generates a great charge of constructive energy in the external world around us and shapes our external circumstances in ways that we would never have anticipated. This is part of the evidence we have for the existence of the collective unconscious. We find that the unconscious connects us to other people and to our entire environment. Therefore, when we focus a great deal of energy within the inner world, a parallel energy often arises in the people or situations around us. In this way, we can do healing through our inner work that we never could have done through external means. That is powerful. Here again is the dream of the monastery. In the monastery, I am in a monastic cloister, in a room or cell attached to the chapel. I am separated from the people and the rest of the chapel by a grille. And again, I don't know if it's supposed to be grille or grill, Grille. Mass begins. I participate alone in my cell. I sit with my legs crossed, zazen style, but holding my rosary. I hear the murmurs of the responses through the grille. The voices are tranquil. I close my eyes and I too receive communion, although no one and nothing physical enters my cell. The Mass finishes. I become aware of flowers blooming at the side of my chamber. I feel a deep serenity. That's the dream. After this woman worked on her dream, she saw the implications for her religious life and practice, but she couldn't think of anything physical to do about it. It seemed to be a matter of inner vision, of understanding inwardly. No outer act was implied. In fact, if she ran out and began searching for a religious group to join, it would violate the spirit of the dream, which was to be quiet in her own awareness of the spirit. Finally, the young woman thought of a simple symbolic act she could do that would express her feelings about the dream and its meaning to her. In the dream, when she had received communion, she saw that flowers had burst spontaneously into bloom at the side of her cell during the Mass. She went and gathered flowers like those in her dream. She drove to the ocean with the flowers and made a solemn ceremony of going to the edge of the sea and casting the flowers into the waves. She did this as a physical yet symbolic act of giving the gift she had received back to Mother Earth, back to the feminine sea of the unconscious. She felt at the time that this was too little, that she should think of something grander to do in honor of such a wonderful dream. But it was all she could think of, so she did it. She felt immensely grateful for the dream, and this was an act of gratitude toward God and toward the inner feminine. Leaving the ocean, she drove quietly back to her house and found that a friend had come to visit while she was at the beach, a friend whom she did not see very often. Together they took a short drive around the neighborhood. Then several things occurred in rapid succession that seemed like coincidences, yet could not be. First, as they drove, she discovered that there was a monastery in her neighborhood just a few blocks from her home. She was startled, for inwardly she had been in a monastery all night and all morning. Her friend was one of the few lay people who had permission to enter the cloister, and she even had a key for the gate. Her friend suggested that they stop and visit the chapel and greet the nuns. When our dreamer walked into the monastery chapel, she felt as though she had walked back into her dream. The chapel, which she had never seen before, was identical to the chapel in her dream. Every detail was the same. She settled down by herself in the chapel to meditate in zazen posture, and all the meanings, feelings, and intense serenity of the dream experience flowed through her again. In the days that followed, she too was granted permission to visit the monastery regularly to meditate, spend quiet time, and nourish the part of her that is a monastic. The dream of the monastery became an external physical reality as well as an inner reality in the land of dreaming. The inner flow and the outer flow became parallel energy systems moving in tandem. The paradox in all this is that at the point where she was ready to give up all external forms of belonging or institutional religion, this woman suddenly found herself in a physical monastery, a physical chapel, a physical group of nuns with whom she can spend a few hours of her week in a sense of religious community. And none of this contradicts the inner monastery, the inner life of the spirit shown in her dream that is beyond external and collective religious forms. As you can see, the ritual that the dreamer did for her great dream did not seem very dramatic to her, but her ceremony of the flowers was exactly appropriate to the simple and powerful symbols in the dream. It generated a connection between the inner world of the dream and the outer physical world, which facilitated the synchronous events later in the day and tied the two sides of the reality together. Of her reality together. Sorry, I'm getting sleepy. If we learn to live this way, we find that all our dreams manifest both inwardly and outwardly. It is only our unawareness that prevents us from seeing the subtle connections. Our rituals and ceremonies can help us to see where the inner world and the physical world meet and where they reflect each other as they move in parallel fields of energy. When you can't think of anything to do, you can always do a simple physical act, even if you can't think of something that relates directly to your dream. Go out and walk around the block in honor of your dream, if that is all you can think of. Light a candle, do something. If you consciously do some act, any act, in honor of your dream, it will register with your unconscious. I remember a marvelous man, a monk, who came to do analysis with me. He had never come closer to the incarnate world than Thomas Aquinas. He was an intellectual, and everything for him was spiritual, theoretical, and abstract. In response to his dreams, he did the most airy flights in fantasy and theology, but his dreams never seemed to register with him in his emotional life, his practical life, his relationship to people, or to the world around him. Everything was fine until we came to the fourth stage of dream work. Then he would get angry with me. He didn't see why he should do anything about the dream. He thought it enough to understand with his mind to grasp the theory. One day he worked on a dream, and he got angry with me as usual and said, "So what do you expect me to do about this one?" An irrational response jumped out of some place in my unconscious. "You could go out and look at the bark of 10 trees in honor of the dream." He looked at me, startled, stood up, muttered something, and backed out of the room. I felt a little sheepish. There wasn't anything about trees or bark in the dream. I was just as startled at what had come out of my mouth as he was. About 3 hours later, the monk came pounding on my door in high excitement. He said, "Robert, you don't know how interesting the bark on trees is. Some of it is brown, some is gray, some is smooth, some has great wrinkles in it, and little creatures live in it. It is a different color on the north side than the south side, and moss grows on it, and you wouldn't believe how beautiful and interesting the bark on trees is." In that 3 hours, this man awakened for the first time to his physical being and to the physical world. He saw the spirit in the physical world rather than dissociated from it. It was as though we had finished a Zen Buddhist koan. What is the bark on 10 trees? Koans are cryptic statements or vignettes that Zen roshis or masters traditionally give to monks, ordering them to find the answer to the koan. But the koan is so constructed that no answer can be found within ordinary ego logic. The monks must push themselves out of traditional categories and over the brink into irrational, intuitive wisdom. One famous example of a koan is this: "Show me the sound of one hand clapping." As with all koans, there can be no ordinary answer to the question, "What is the bark on 10 trees?" But my friend discovered as his answer that you find the entire universe in the bark of 10 trees. Using common sense. Your imagination will usually produce a good physical ritual for your dream. You should go to your imagination for help on this. As we have learned, imagination in your dreams come from the same source, and they are consonant. But not everything your imagination produces should be acted on externally. You still have to use your head. The Hindu saint Sri Aurobindo once said, "Why is it that when people begin to relinquish the world, the first thing they relinquish is common sense?" You may feel as you confront the new and magical world of dreams that you are giving up your old, narrow world. But don't give up on common sense. Don't give up on courtesy or respect toward the people around you. This fourth step of dream work, the physical ritual, is a very powerful tool that can affect your life profoundly if it is used constructively. But if you use it in a silly or irresponsible way, it can cause you and other people a lot of grief. Think twice before you do things that are too dramatic or confrontational that will involve other people and their feelings. You should avoid doing things in response to your dreams that will get you unnecessarily into trouble. You should not get into destructive confrontations with other people. Don't use your dream as a license to act out. Sometimes a dream will remind us of a conflict with another person, or it may galvanize some longing in us to break free from it all, to give up the restraints of society, responsibility, or commitment. In those situations, you should be careful not to overreact, not to start rearranging your world or your relationships without giving it some long and careful thought. You can do a lot of damage if you go off half-cocked. Once I had a patient who was in graduate school. He was irritated with his roommate, a close friend, because his roommate was irresponsible. One night, my patient dreamed that he gave his roommate an angry lecture and it ended in a fist fight. When he awakened, his first impulse was to go and tell off his roommate, tell him what an ass he was, and have it out with him. But instead, he did his dream work. He asked, "Who is the one inside me who is represented by my roommate's image?" He began to realize that he was really most upset with his own irresponsibility, which kept him from studying for his classes. He had chosen his friend's image to represent his own tendency to be lazy and disorganized. When he came to the fourth step of dream work, he asked himself what physical ritual he could do to make his dream concrete. The temptation to go fight with his friend was still very strong, but he resisted it. Instead, he sat down and wrote a long letter addressed to the part of himself that needed to grow up, make some decisions, and be an adult. He wrote several pages. He explained everything he had learned about taking responsibility, making choices and sacrifices, sticking to a schedule, everything that his inner roommate needed to know. He put the letter in an envelope, addressed the envelope to himself, then went to the post office and made a formal ceremony of posting it. The next day the letter arrived in the mail. When he opened this envelope addressed to himself, he was shaken. It was as though the voice of the unconscious, coming from far away, was speaking to him through the letter. For weeks after that, he wrote a letter to himself every few days and mailed it to himself. With each letter that he received, the message and the implications of his dream burned themselves more deeply into his consciousness. It permanently altered his view of his life. This example illustrates our principle. The fourth step of dream work does not consist in dramatically confronting people you're angry with, breaking up relationships, or doing destructive things. It does not consist of trying to straighten things out with a lot of talk. That leads nowhere. It should be a physical ritual that affirms your own personal responsibility for your dream and for the issue it portrays. If you do have unfinished business with some external person, you will be able to approach it in a constructive and non-combative way after you've done your dream work, done your private ritual, taken responsibility for your share of the confusion. Keep your rituals subtle and low-key, positive and affirmative, and you will get the best from them. Ritual is one of our most powerful tools for making a synthesis between the polarities of human reality. It is an art that ties our two halves together. The archetypal spiritual yang needs to be tied to the here and now earthiness of your yin nature. The masculine spirit that gets so lost in abstraction and theory needs to be anchored to the feminine earth, needs to experience directly the feminine soul. The path to the feminine side of reality is through concreteness, matter as mater or mother, earth connectedness. All of this constellates most directly through the physical act. The world you see in your dream is the inner world that exists outside time and space. Some of its energy and its messages must be incarnated into this human world of the here and now. It must find its way into your daily life, for its truth is lost unless you live it. That's getting pretty crazy. I like this. I think I will practice it. I'll try it out. Dream work illustration, the 4 hoodlums. To illustrate our 4-step system in a practical way, I'm going to work through a sample dream, and you are invited to join me. This is a fairly short dream that I had many years ago, but dreams that seem small and simple can have earth-shaking implications for the dreamer, as this one did for me. This dream also illustrates how archetypal references can be used in combination with purely personal associations to produce a sense of the dream's message. Here's my dream. The dream of the 4 hoodlums. I'm in my hometown, Portland, Oregon. I'm walking on Williams Avenue, the street I used to walk down to get to grammar school. This is my old neighborhood, just as it was in the days of my childhood. I walk past the Japanese greengrocers on the corner, and the store is still there. It seems that I'm visiting the old neighborhood. I feel that I am at my present age, but I have been transported back to that place as it once was. I walk past a vacant lot. I feel that there is something lurking there. I have a sudden intuition that I will be robbed. I stop and take my wallet out of my hip pocket and remove the cash. I see that I have $40. I slip the cash into my left shirt pocket, over my chest, and put the wallet back into my hip pocket. 4 young hoodlums jump out of the shrubbery and surround me. I know that this is the robbery I intuited. I see it is useless to run. There are 4 of them. They are younger and stronger than I. They are street people and can easily overpower me. They search me carefully, starting at my shoes and working upward. When they reach my hip pockets, they find my wallet but no money, so they keep searching. When they get to my shirt pocket on the left side, they find the $40. But by that time, they have spent so much time with me, and there has been so much physical touching that they know me. In a sense, we have become acquainted, become friends. They stay talking with me in a friendly way, but they don't take my money because now we are friends, and you don't take your friend's money. I feel absurdly happy to have these hoodlums as friends and like them very much. Wow! Alright, so step 1, making the associations. As we go through the dream, I'm going to use 2 formats to illustrate 2 ways that you can lay out your associations on paper. The first format is very concise and abbreviated. As you see below, I put the symbol in the left margin and then write down in the most abbreviated form whatever associations come out of my mind in response to the symbol. The second format is more of a conversational way of talking to yourself on paper about your associations. I will also use the second format as an informal commentary for the reader, explaining how I came up with some of my associations. You may use either of these formats or use the wheel and spokes method of diagramming that we learned earlier. And that's just putting the one central image at a time and then drawing little dashes off and then the spokes and then just putting each thing it associates with. And this is specifically for the reason of not getting off on a tangent by associating, my grandma's house with my grandma's cookies with my grandma's house furniture, her kitchen, and the pantry of her kitchen. And it's only about the one thing, and then you do all the different associations with that one thing to keep yourself centered. As you read through the material, you will notice that I usually have a lot of associations with every image, and only a few of those associations really turn out to click or fit into the final interpretation. In fact, you might find yourself getting impatient with all this meandering page after page through associations that don't turn out to be applicable in the end. I have deliberately left in all these associations so that you can see what a person actually has to go through in order to try out all the different associations, find the ones that click, fit them to inner parts of the self, and finally weld everything together into an interpretation. It took me a couple of weeks returning to this dream and coming up with the associations before it all started to fall into place, but it was worth it. The dream altered my conception of who I am and changed the course of my life. My associations to the dream symbols: Williams Avenue and the old neighborhood, time of childhood before waking up to conflict, Garden of Eden, Streets, first place child aware of people congregating, collectivity, beginning a collective existence, nostalgia. Williams Avenue represents to me that time of life when I was a child before I woke up and became aware of the divisions and conflicts inherent in life. Childhood in that neighborhood with its old wooden houses was a simple, happy time. Williams Avenue is for me the street, the archetypal street that formed my whole feeling of streets as places where people live and congregate, where there are businesses, little hubs of civilization, and human collective existence. I was in a Garden of Eden in that neighborhood. It was right before I woke up to ethical conflicts, right and wrong, before I learned there was betrayal and hatred in the world. It is my pre-conscious Garden of Eden. Next image is the Japanese greengrocer. People of another culture, this is his association. People of another culture, culture with ritual, ceremony, grace, delicacy, lady in kimono, courtesy, basket of lilacs, rice cakes, Zen Buddhism, India, feeling and relatedness, relationship outside of projection, casualness, sentimentality. The first thing that comes to mind is that this was my first experience of meeting people of another culture, and they fascinated me. I became aware for the first time of the differences in people, aware of a way of doing things that was ritualized, graceful, and delicate. I remember that a relative arrived from Japan dressed in a kimono. There was bowing and exchanging of courtesies while I looked on, struck with the beauty of the formalities, the courtesy and respect that old-fashioned Japanese people knew how to show, something I'd never seen in middle-class Portland among my own Anglo tribe. The Japanese family brought out a little bit of the sense of courtesy and formality in my own family. Each year my grandmother sent a basket of lilacs to them, and a day later a package of delicate rice cakes was always delivered to our house as a return gift. The world that the Japanese greengrocer opened up in me is a vision that I have been trying instinctively to augment ever since. It was the beginning of the impulse that led me to travel to Japan and India. I associate it with my spontaneous interest in Zen Buddhism, Eastern philosophy, Hindu culture. The Japanese family constellated a sense in me of something high, noble, and beautiful that was outside my own cultural experience. Years later, I understood that traditional Eastern people also represented to me a capacity for warmth and relatedness that is not the same as getting personal in the shallow, casual, artificial, backslapping way that so many Americans use as a substitute for genuine feeling and relatedness. And Japanese culture, especially the Zen culture, represents at its best a true respect for the inner world, for religious experience, and for beauty. All these associations come to mind from this one symbol. And that was a long one. So you can go as long as you need. Next symbol is the vacant lot. Undeveloped equals primitive. Wild place in middle of city. Bounded by streets equals limits. Boundaries form structure, but no form vacant lot. No form in the vacant lot. Uncivilized, outside reach of law. Piece of wilderness. Have to clear weeds annually. Fire hazard. Hiding place for outlaws. Retreat. Religious retreat. Shadowy place, place of shadow, unconscious place in the middle of my conscious areas. Ooh, is this his stream of consciousness? To me, a vacant lot is a piece of untouched primitive land in the middle of the city. Everything around it is civilized, developed, turned to human use, but the lot is still like a piece of wilderness, although the vacant lot is bounded and defined by streets, which I think represent civilization to me. It is not civilized. It feels like a place that is outside the law, like the Sherwood Forest of Robin Hood, where the hoodlums, literally outlaws, could lurk. I also associate it with unconsciousness and with the shadow, a place inside me that is circumscribed by consciousness, but is in the shadow and outside my conscious control. Next image is the wallet. Place where you keep money, so a place for keeping resources, credit cards, ID, therefore wallet equals a kind of passport for getting by with people. Wallet usually goes at hip pocket, keeps money at hip level. Wallet equals useful, but can also be for show, pretentious, and artificial form of security. That one was short and sweet. Now moving on to the money symbol or image. $40 equals 4. 4 equals wholeness, completeness, totality, the completion of a cycle or synthesis. He's talking numerology here. Money is a resource, energy, power, psychological strength or power, life force, something you invest. Keep it at the hip level or at the chest level. Where is it invested? Where is it invested? Where is it put to work? This is where archetypal amplification begins to help. I know that numbers are very important in dreams, and I know that the number 4 is a traditional symbol of completeness, unity, wholeness, totality. This is so in most religions, in alchemy, in ancient philosophical systems. The Greeks believed in 4 elements, earth, air, fire, and water. The Christian mandala has 12 disciples grouped in 4 sections around Christ. The American Indians structured their religions around 4 directions and 4 winds. It represents a bringing together of the main elements of the individual into a whole consciousness. Money seems to be associated with resources, perhaps physical or psychological energy, or at a deeper level, life force. Money is something one invests. So where am I investing my life force, my attention, my main energy? Resources are also personal talents, strengths, intelligence. You can use money to get something done, thus a capacity for practical things, getting something accomplished. Money is something we earn by our efforts. It represents the accumulated value of our work, discipline, expertise. Next symbol is the hip pocket. One of the chakras, centers of consciousness, is close to the hips, the visceral emotional side of the personality, the center that controls visceral energies. To be hip, opium user, origin of hippie equals originally into the drug scene. Also hip equals to be into the scene, hip to what's going on, hip to the jive. I learned that the phrase to be hip came from the old opium subculture, where to be on your hip meant to lie in an opium trance. When psychedelic drugs and marijuana became popular among the Beat generation, people who were into such things were hip. From this came the slang hippie. What are my associations? Most of hippie life to me represents a pretense of going into a life of love and spirituality while actually being irresponsible and dependent. It is a way of staying in the negative side of the mother complex. Another association is shooting from the hip. In Kundalini Yoga, there is a chakra located in the region of the hips, a center of consciousness. I think it controls the visceral energies, which in yogic symbolism means the raw emotions and raw instinctual animal energies. After one has developed that center of consciousness, the consciousness has to be moved up to the higher chakras in the body. So moving my money away from the hip up to the chest level could mean moving the focus of my life away from the visceral or hip level. The other association that clicks for me is the idea of being hip in the sense of with it or into the scene. I can think of examples of my investing my energy and trying to be in with a group of people or connected so that I would feel part of the scene. Next image, left shirt pocket over chest. First associations in the first format he was talking about. Over heart, heart level, heart values equals feeling values, feeling function, Anahata chakra in Kundalini, invest energy at heart level, feeling relationships to people. And next is his more extended stream of consciousness, like writing to himself format, which has been in each of these other examples too, but I just thought I'd point it out in case you're wondering why is it repeating. It's demonstrating 2 different ways to do the activity. This dream was like a mystery story that slowly unfolded for me. At first I could not make any associations to the left shirt pocket. I sensed that the movement of the $40 up to that pocket was somehow the crucial point in the dream, but one that produced all the rest of the events, but I could not for the life of me find an association that really clicked for me. I don't know how long it was, days, perhaps weeks, that I tried all sorts of crazy associations. Then it occurred to me that the pocket was over the heart, or at the level of the heart. If the pants pocket could be called the hip pocket, the shirt pocket could be as well called the heart pocket. That opened up a flood of associations. Heart values are feeling values. The heart level is the feeling level. In Jung's model, the feeling function is not connected with emotions, as some people assume. Feelings and emotions are distinct energy systems in the psyche. When people feel, they are actually assigning value. If you feel love toward another person, you are assigning the highest value to that person, affirming that person's worth or value. When you feel that something is beautiful, you are again assigning a value or